Do you know what happened on Jesus's last day on earth? Want to go on a journey that changed history and defines our Christian faith? Let's do it. So we're in Passion Week right now. And let's go day by day from the moment that Jesus walks into Bethany all the way when he gets arrested, he gets crucified, and then he resurrects again. So Passion Week, the word passion means, it comes from the word passia, which means suffering. So we're in Suffering Week right now. Passion Week's timeline and breakdown. So let's start on Friday, day 6, before the Passover. So in the evening, Jesus arrives to Bethany. Bethany is in the east of Jerusalem. Jesus stays with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, their siblings. That is the Lazarus that Jesus raised from the dead. And that's the Martha that is always working. And Mary was sitting on Jesus's feet. That's a different Mary than Mary Magdalene, just so you guys know. These are 3 siblings. And then on Saturday, he's still in Bethany. Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, anoints Jesus' feet with an expensive, very extremely expensive perfume. And she wipes his feet with her hair. Jesus gets a lot of comments about the situation, but what she has done shows how much she loves him, how much she adores him. Usually when you have a guest in your house, you wash their feet. And instead of washing his feet with water, she washes his feet with a beautiful, expensive perfume and dries his feet with her hair. And she doesn't know it. Jesus is going to be arrested, beaten, and crucified very, very soon. And she doesn't know that, but she's basically prophetically in her actions getting his body ready for burial. And then Sunday comes, which is now one day of the Passion Week, the week of suffering. It's Palm Sunday. A lot of you know what Palm Sunday is when Jesus was walking into Jerusalem and people would put their the palm trees and their cloaks on the ground for him to walk in. And he actually enters Jerusalem riding a donkey. The crowds lay the palm branches and their cloaks on the ground for him, and they shout, "Hosanna!" They are proclaiming that he is the coming Messiah. And Palm Sunday is literally the Sunday before Easter, the Sunday before Resurrection Sunday. And there's a lot of prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. We're just going to go through just a few of them. Zechariah 9:9, see your king comes to you lowly and riding a donkey. That was prophesied when Jesus rode a donkey to walk into Jerusalem, and it was fulfilled. So day 2 of Passion Week, now it's Monday. In the morning, Jesus goes to the temple and Jesus overturns the tables of the money changers and condemns the commercializing of the temple. You guys know this when he has a whoop and he's like, "What are you guys doing to my Father's house?" And this is when he actually said, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." And this took place again in Jerusalem. A prophecy was fulfilled here. Malachi 3:1, the Lord will suddenly come to his temple. He will purify. So this was fulfilled here. Day 3 of Passion Week, Tuesday, Jesus goes to the temple in Jerusalem again, and he teaches parables. He confronts religious leaders, and he predicts the destruction of the temple. They're thinking physically destructing the temple. He's talking about his body, which is the temple. A prophecy that was fulfilled is Psalm 78:2, Isaiah 6:9 to 10. Parable will be used to teach, but many will not understand. A lot of things that Jesus was teaching about, the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders did not understand what he's talking about. And these were fulfilled here. So day 4, Wednesday, Jesus goes back to Bethany, to Mary and Martha and Lazarus's house. And at that time, what happened is the Sanhedrin plots to arrest Jesus. And that is when Judas, the disciple of Jesus, one of the 12, agrees to betray him for 30 pieces of silver. And another prophecy was fulfilled here, Psalm 41:9. Even my close friend has lifted up his heel against me. Day 5, Thursday. This is when the Last Supper happened and the Garden of the Gethsemane. So let's go through it. In the evening, Jesus goes to the upper room in Jerusalem with his disciples, and Jesus washes his disciples' feet, all of them. And Jesus teaches about the Eucharist and the communion. This was the first time Jesus breaks the bread and shares the wine and talks to them about his body and his blood. And he shares communion for the first time with them, and they all partake of it. And they share the Last Supper together. And this would have been their Passover meal. This is when the disciples were talking about who's the greatest, Jesus, who's the greatest? And this is actually when Jesus predicted that who will betray him. And then that's when Judas leaves the room. Then following the supper, they leave the upper room. Jesus and his disciples go to the Mount of Olives. Actually, at that time, that's when Jesus predicted the betrayal of the denial of Peter. But we don't know if it was during that time when he was in the Mount of Olives going to the garden, or if it was in the upper room. Some scholars believe it was in the upper room. Some scholars believe it was on the way to the garden. So I'm just gonna throw it out there. Then they go to the Garden of Gethsemane. That's when Jesus is there and he's praying, and he asks the disciples, hey, I'm gonna go to pray. Could you please stay and keep a watch? And sadly, he comes back an hour later and they're asleep. And then he goes to pray a second time, and he comes back after that and finds them asleep again. The Bible actually says in Luke 22 that Jesus was experiencing intense agony. He was in so much pain. Imagine knowing that he was going to be led to the cross, not only going to be beaten and crucified, but he's also going to handle all the sin of the world. And with sin comes diseases, comes all kinds of pain. So he was in so much agony. An angel even appeared from heaven to give him strength. He was so full of anguish that his sweat, when they fell down, felt like drops of blood. Actually, there's a lot of scientists say that when you're under so much stress, your vessels in your brain can burst and you can actually sweat blood. So then Jesus woke up his disciples and told them, hey, wake up, my betrayer is coming. And afterwards, that's when Judas and a crowd of armed with swords and clubs arrived. As if Jesus is dangerous. He's never seriously hurt anyone. And a crowd was made from the Roman soldiers and Jewish officials, and Judas comes to kiss Jesus on the cheek. I don't understand why he picked that, but basically this was his way of saying, that's Jesus, you can arrest him. It's a signal between them. That's when Peter gets really upset and attempts to stop the situation from happening, and he ends up cutting the ear of the high priest's servant, but Jesus heals his ear. And Jesus doesn't put a fight, and he tells them don't fight with the soldiers, and he goes with them quietly. Jesus was arrested at midnight, which starts the day 6 on Friday. Jesus was literally arrested in midnight, and Friday starts. A lot of prophecies were fulfilled, and some of them were about the Passover lamb in Exodus 12, Isaiah 53:7, like a lamb to the slaughter. And then it talks also about no broken bones, because Jesus's body, when he was crucified, not one bone was broken. And even when they arrested him, they did not break a bone. And by the way, that is usually something that the soldiers would do. And also there was a prophecy about the Messiah being betrayed for 30 pieces of silver in Zechariah and Zechariah 11:12-13. Price of betrayal used to buy a potter's field, which is 30 pieces of silver. And so basically Jesus was betrayed for that amount. Another prophecy about being struck, and the shepherd being struck and the sheep are scattered. Zechariah 13:7, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. When Jesus was arrested, all of his disciples were scattered. So now we enter day 6. Day 6 is Friday. Friday is 2 days before the resurrection. That is the day when Jesus is tried, crucified, and buried all in the same day. So now Jesus is arrested and he goes with the soldiers and gets tried. So the trial is in phases. I'm dividing them into phases, and this is phase 1. So now Jesus is arrested. It's at midnight on Friday night. And remember, Jesus has not slept since the day before. And he goes to Annas, the former high priest, This was kind of illegal, by the way. It is illegal to have a trial at night. This is not something that the Jews did or the Romans allowed, but they did it. So Annas questioned Jesus about his doctrine and his disciples. And Annas did not like Jesus' answers, and he felt they were not very satisfactory. So he sent Jesus to Caiaphas for further examination. So who is Annas? Annas is basically the former high priest. He's not the high priest right now, presently in Jesus' time. He's the former high priest, but he held so much power. He's also the father-in-law of the present high priest, Caiaphas. And he's very, very influential. And so he sent him for an official judgment to Caiaphas. Again, who is Caiaphas? Joseph Caiaphas. He is now the present high priest, and he is the one who's in charge of the Sanhedrin at that time. Also, another note that I wanted to share is that, keynote, Caiaphas is the one that declared that it is better for one man to die than for the whole nation to perish, based on John 11:49-50. Unknowingly, he's prophesying Jesus's sacrificial death. So now phase 2 of the trial. Jesus goes to Caiaphas. So they move him. They arrest him, take him to Annas. Annas sends him to Caiaphas and for further examination. So Caiaphas questions Jesus. And the chief priests were there, and the Sanhedrin as well. They were trying to find any evidence against Jesus at that time so they could put him to death. They didn't want to understand Jesus. They literally just wanted to put him to death. The leaders were so desperate to find him guilty in any way. They literally were so crooked, they used false witnesses to testify against him. And by the way, the testimonies did not match or even agree together. And it was only when the high priest asked Jesus if he was the Christ, Son of the Blessed, and Jesus answered, I am. And they went, everybody went just crazy on that. Then the high priest tore his clothes off and said, what other evidence do we need? Do you have heard this blasphemy? What is your decision? And the members of the Sanhedrin said that Jesus deserved death. And that's when Jesus was found guilty. And by the way, this was the same exact time, around that time, that Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So now we're in phase 3 of the trial. And at dawn, the entire Sanhedrin met to judge Jesus. And they were outraged that Jesus claims to be the Son of God, which in Jewish culture was punishable by death. The Sanhedrin was the governing authority among the Jewish people. So they had the right to make, those time of assumptions. But they did not have the authority to sentence a man to death. They didn't have that authority. Only Roman officials were authorized to make a decision like that. So they sent Jesus to Pilate. And by the way, this is the same time now and that time frame that Judas realized that Jesus could be condemned and to death, and wanted to give back the silver to the chief priests, but they refused him. So he threw the money in the temple and went away and hung himself. So it shows that Judas did not know that this was going to lead Jesus to death, and he was regretful. Now, instead of going to God and turning away from his sin and repenting, he chose to kill himself because he could have been forgiven. Now we're in phase 4 of the trial. So Jesus goes to Pilate, who is the Roman governor at that time, and they recommended that he would be put to death. Pilate questioned Jesus, but he could not find any reason to put him to death. Their religious leaders would not accept that decision. They're like, no, you need to find something. And after a comment that the religious leaders made, Pilate realized that Jesus was from Galilee. And when Pilate figured out, Jesus is from Galilee, and which is under Herod's jurisdiction, since Pilate governed Judea and Idumea. So he sent Jesus to Herod. Now, phase 5 of the trial. Jesus goes now from Pilate to Herod. I know this is a lot. It's a lot of moving from one place to another, but that's what happens. So Jesus now is meeting with Herod. And by the way, this is Herod Antipas, the one that put John the Baptist to death. That's who made that decision. And he had no desire to make a final judgment on Jesus either. He questioned him, ridiculed him, he mocked him, but then he sent him back to Pilate. And that's when phase 10 of the trial happened. So now Jesus is back to Pilate, and Pilate was put in a very, very difficult situation. He didn't find any reason to punish, any basis for the charge against Jesus. He did not find a reason to put Jesus to death. He was like, fine, we can punish him and release him, but put him to death for what? I don't see a reason. But he was afraid. He was afraid from the Jewish leaders and the Sanhedrin, because they wanted to put him to death and they were pressuring Pilate. So now the Sanhedrin accused Jesus of claiming to be king. And they did that because they knew that that was against the Romans' rule. And so they were like, hey, this man is claiming to be a king, which put Pilate in a very, very bad situation because it conflicts with the rule of Rome. Rome does not allow anybody else saying that they are going to be a king or they are a king other than them. This would be political treason, an act of threat, basically, and war. And Pilate couldn't ignore that. So at this point, the people asked Pilate to do what he usually did for them at the time of Passover. At the time of Passover, usually Rome would release a prisoner. And so by agreeing with this custom, Pilate permitted the crowd to choose freedom between Jesus and a person called Barabbas. So Jesus brought two people to Pilate brought two people to the crowd and said, hey, you have Jesus here and you have Barabbas, who was a freedom fighter and a murderer. Which one of these people do you want me to release? Because this is our custom. I release a prisoner every time there is, during the Passover. And the crowd shouted, we want Barabbas to be released. They did not want Jesus. They wanted Barabbas. So then he said, okay, what do you want me to do with Jesus? Like, okay, I'll release Barabbas, who's a murderer. But what do you want me to do with Jesus? And they basically shouted, crucify him, crucify him. By the way, guys, a lot of these people were the same people that put palm trees and cloaks on the ground when Jesus entered Jerusalem. They changed. People changed really fast. And so Pilate realized, I can't refuse the people because they're going to riot and I don't want any issues. So then he gave into that, into them and the demands of the leaders, the religious leaders and the crowd. And that's when phase 7 happens. Pilate condemns Jesus to death. He literally brings a water bowl and he washes his hands in front of the crowd, saying, I wash my hands of Jesus's blood. Basically saying, I know this man is innocent. I'm going to give you guys what you want by condemning him to death, but I don't want any blood on my hands because I don't think this is right. And he released Barabbas and he ordered that Jesus would be flogged. Then Jesus was led to the Roman palace and handed over to a group of soldiers. And Jesus's trial, did you guys know that Jesus's trial was highly irregular? I want to pause for a second and go over something, and then we'll continue on Jesus's journey and tell you what happened. Jesus's trial was very, very irregular. It was conducted at night, which was not the usual practice, which made it illegal. In most criminal cases, they would call for a defense witness, but they did not allow that for Jesus. The witness for the persecution did not match. What they would say did not match. Their testimonies were obviously false. Treason was not the original charge against Jesus. From the beginning, Jesus did not bring him and say he claimed to be a king. That was not the official original charge against him. It was brought up after the trial started. An obvious attempt to manipulate the judgment, which makes the entire case illegal. A death sentence was not usually pronounced until the day after the trial, but in Jesus' situation, it was pronounced the same day. It was very, very highly irregular. So let's continue on phase 7. Let's see what happened to Jesus after he was handed over to the soldiers. Jesus was struck on the face. He was mocked by the guards, and there were between 900 to 1,200 guards. He was blindfolded, belittled. He was spit on, which was very, very humiliating in Jewish culture to spit on someone, which would make him unclean, just so you know. His beard was pulled. Like, seriously, why would you do that? His beard was pulled. He was exhausted from the day before. He hasn't had sleep the entire time. And he was dehydrated. He hasn't had water. He's hungry. He was bruised in his body. His clothes was ripped off of him, stripped off of him. He was naked. He was whipped, and the whip was from bones, stones, glass, and it tore his flesh off, literally. He was made fun of, and they threw a robe across his shoulder and put a stick in his hand to resemble a scepter, mocking him. Oh, you're a king, look at you. A crown of thorns was placed on his head. And based on research, let me tell you this, when the thorn dug into his scalp, they hit nerves, causing excruciating pain through his entire skull, brain, and body. They struck him on the face over and over, which caused the thorns to dig deeper into his head, causing more pain. They tore the robe off of his back, which caused the torn flesh and scabs that was on his back, which started to heal and dry from the hot sun that was happening at that time, to tear open again. So it tore his skin, which caused horrifying pain. And at this point, Jesus was probably the most inhumane thing you have ever seen. Actually, the prophet Isaiah in 52:14 says, but many were amazed when they saw him. He prophesied this, okay? The prophet Isaiah prophesied, which fulfilled this. He said, but many were amazed when they saw him. His face was so disfigured, he hardly seemed human. And from his appearance, one would scarcely know he was a man. So first, you wouldn't even know if he's a human and an animal. You wouldn't even know he's a man. That's how disfigured Jesus was. And at 9 a.m. on Friday, Jesus was led to be crucified. Remember, Jesus was arrested at midnight, taken to trial, and then he was now led to be crucified at 9 in the morning to Golgotha, Calvary. They put him on the cross. They dug 3 nails in him, 2 in his wrists, through his bones, and 1 in his feet to hold his weight up. And as Jesus slowly sagged down with the weight of his body carried on the nails through his wrists, excruciating fiery pain shoots along most sensitive nerves ending in his body. It's called the median nerves. Travels along the fingers, up the arms, and explodes in his brain. Every time Jesus tried to take a breath, he had to shuffle his weight from his feet to his arm and vice versa to lift himself up. And at some point, he could no longer have the strength to put his weight up to be able to breathe. Jesus was literally drowning in his lungs and suffocating. Jesus felt separated from God on the cross, so we could never, ever feel separated from God if we receive him and receive his gift of salvation. Separation from God is literal spiritual death and hell. Literally, what is hell? It's a place that exists to separate the demons and Satan from God. It's a separation because the demons and Satan don't want God, so there is a place for them where they are separated completely from God. This place was never made for humans. But again, if people want to follow Satan and the demons, they're going to end up in the same place that they will at the end. And so what is literal hell? Hell is being separated spiritually from God, being separated physically from God, which that is hell. Let me tell you a little bit of what the Bible actually says hell, and then we're going to continue on the journey. Hell is a place of complete darkness, a place of weeping and grinding of teeth like this when you're in pain, a place of thirst and no water. Have you ever felt so thirsty? I have. I've had surgeries, and I can tell you that is one of the most horrifying feelings you could ever have. It's a place of complete torment, a place of no rest. You don't have rest there. A place of suffering day and night, complete suffering every single day of every minute. A place of where you are separated from God forever. Hell is a lake that burns with fire and brimstone. There are worms there that eat the flesh and do not die, a place where the fire that burns never go out, a place of everlasting punishment, a place prepared for the devil and his angels, a place not made for human beings. So if you have not received Jesus, I would encourage you to receive him. You don't want to end up in hell. But I would not tell you that that's the reason you should receive Jesus. I would tell you that you should follow Jesus and receive him because he loves you. And he paid for all of your sins. And he offered salvation, freedom, deliverance, and healing and the works of the cross through his blood. That is what the Christian faith is all about. So let's go back to the story. Now, generally, crucified victims took about 2 to 3 days to die slowly, and they suffered. Jesus died in 6 hours. Literally 6 hours. He was crucified at 9 a.m. and he was dead at 3 p.m. on Friday. Jesus died 6 hours at 3 p.m. on Friday. He was pronounced dead. Not only Jesus experienced physical torment, but he underwent intense spiritual pain. Just imagine, he bore all the sins of the world, every sin that was committed from the moment that creation started with Adam and Eve, all the way to when he comes back again. Every sin that you committed, every sin I committed, every sin that every single person has ever committed, all the murder, all the rape, all the pedophilia, every sin that has ever been committed, every wicked sin. And he handled all the sins physically and spiritually on that cross. He felt every guilt, every shame, the weight of those sins, the consequences of those sins. He felt every sickness because sickness entered the world after sin. Every disease of the world, I believe that he felt every sickness and every disease on that cross. He felt how it feels to have diabetes and cancer, the most massive headache, how it feels to have a herniated disc, every single disease and every single sickness and every single pain. He died on the cross for it. According to research and medical references, Jesus died of heart failure. Jesus literally died of a broken heart. This is because the physical and the spiritual pain of sin broke his heart physically. And he died. And still on Friday, he died at 3 p.m. and he was taken to the tomb. His body was placed in a tomb before even sunset. The tomb of Joseph, Arimathea, a tomb in Jerusalem. Jesus' body rests in the tomb and guards were posted outside of the tomb to secure it. They secured it with a big rock that took people to move it. So many prophecies, over 300 prophecies, Jesus fulfilled in his lifetime, but these are just some of them. Silent before his accusers, Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed, yet he opened not his mouth. That was fulfilled. Beaten and mocked, Isaiah 56. I gave my back to those who beat me. That was fulfilled. Hands and feet pierced. In Psalm 22:16, they pierced my hands and feet. That was fulfilled. And there's lots cast of his garments. Psalm 22:18, they divided my garment, cast lots for my clothing. That was fulfilled by Jesus. Given vinegar to drink when he asked for water. Oh my gosh, they gave him vinegar. Psalm 69:21. Remember, all these are in the Old Testament being fulfilled in the New Testament. They gave me vinegar for my thirst. That was fulfilled. Numbered with transgressors. Isaiah 53:12. He was numbered with the transgressors. That was fulfilled. And he was crucified between two thieves. That was fulfilled. Buried in a rich man's tomb. Isaiah 53:9. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich. He was buried in a rich man's tomb. And in day 7, on Saturday, Jesus was in the tomb. Isaiah 53:9 says he was dead and buried, fulfilling his role as the suffering servant. Psalm 16:10 says, you will not abandon me to the grave. And that points to the resurrection. There are so many prophecies that happened thousands of years before Jesus. came to earth that was fulfilled by the life, death, and the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus died because somebody had to pay the penalty of sin. Jesus died so that we can have a relationship with God, so that we are not separated by our sin. Jesus died so that you and me, even though we die physically on earth, we will afterwards be alive. Jesus died so we can have a place to go to after this earth. Jesus died so that you and me can have the gift of salvation, relationship with Jesus, have freedom from oppressing demons and anything that oppresses us. Jesus died so we can have freedom here on earth and in heaven. Jesus died so we can have healing here on earth and in heaven, in every way, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Jesus died so that we can have a relationship with the Father. Jesus died so we can have a relationship with the God that created us, so we can have a purpose on life, and we just don't just live, we have a purpose. Jesus died because he loves you and me so much, and he would die over again even if it was just you. Jesus died and he conquered death on the cross. He conquered sin that leads to death on that cross. Jesus died and he paid for everything with his precious blood. And his inheritance is you and me. People. He died for people. He died for his creation. He died for us because he loves us. And on day 8, which is Easter, what we call Easter, it's Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. In the early morning, women discovered an empty tomb. That's when Jesus resurrected. And he appeared to Mary Magdalene, and later to his disciples, and later to so many people. So many prophecies were fulfilled when Jesus resurrected. Psalm 16:10, Isaiah 53:11, Hosea 6:2. He will not see decay, he will rise, and it was fulfilled. And the first fruits of the resurrection as well was fulfilled. Leviticus 23:10, 2 through 11. First fruit presented after the Sabbath, and it was all fulfilled. Jesus resurrected, giving us life after death, giving us hope, giving us healing and salvation and much more. So if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I want to invite you to have one. Just pray and ask Jesus into your heart. Tell him that you want him to be your Lord and Savior. Ask for forgiveness for your sins. Get a Bible, start reading, and start following all of his commandments, everything that he asked us to do. And this is the journey of Jesus all the way to the cross and resurrection. Jesus is here now. He's alive, and he did all of that for you and me. Happy Easter. Happy Resurrection Sunday.